Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about a truly monumental event. Imagine this, a dynasty that has ruled for over 300 years, an absolute monarchy, collapsing in just a matter of days. This is the story of the February Revolution of 1917. It's a story of cold, of hunger, and of ordinary people who finally said, enough is enough. So, to understand how this all happened, let's travel back in time to the capital city, Petrograd. The winter of 1917 was just brutal, exceptionally cold with heavy frost and deep, deep snow. But the cold wasn't the only problem. You see, Russia was in the middle of the First World War, and the war was draining the country of everything. This led to terrible food shortages in the cities. For the common person, this was a disaster. Just look at the long, desperate queues for bread. This was a daily reality. The city was just simmering with anger and frustration. Now, what's really fascinating is how the city of Petrograd itself was laid out. Its very design, you could say, reflected the huge divisions in Russian society. It was a city that was split both physically and socially. Think of it like this. On one side of the river Neva, the right bank, you had all the workers' quarters and the factories. This is where the poor people lived and worked in terrible conditions. And then on the other side, the left bank, well, that was a different world. That's where you'd find the fashionable areas, the grand government buildings, and of course, the magnificent Winter Palace where the Tsar lived. This physical separation was a constant daily reminder of the enormous gap between the rulers and the working people. So, with so much hardship and so much inequality, it was really only a matter of time before people's patience just ran out. All that simmering anger over the food shortages and the awful working conditions was about to explode into open protest. And things started to happen very, very fast. It all began on February 22nd with a lockout at a single factory. But the very next day, workers from 50 other factories walked out to support them. By the 24th, these protests weren't just staying in the workers' districts. Thousands of people crossed the river and took their demands right to the center of power. And what was the Tsar's response? He just shut down the Duma, Russia's own parliament. He completely ignored what the people were saying, which, of course, just poured fuel on an already raging fire. Now, this is a point we must remember. It's so important to understand the absolutely crucial role that women played in these early days. On February 23rd, which was International Women's Day, it was very often women who led the strikes. There's this amazing story of a woman worker, Marfa Vasileva. She single-handedly called for a strike at her factory. Her boss actually offered her a loaf of bread to go back to work. And she refused, saying these powerful words, "I cannot be the only one who is satiated when others are hungry." Her courage was infectious. It inspired everyone, men and women alike, to join the strike. So as the streets filled up with protesters, they were demanding bread, better wages, democracy. The government decided to use force. It called out the army and the police to put down the demonstrations. This, you see, was the moment of truth. Now, you must be thinking, what chance did these ordinary people really have? Here they were, unarmed, facing trained soldiers with guns. It probably seemed like the protest was doomed to be crushed. But then, something unbelievable happened. The soldiers, who were supposed to be the Tsar's last line of defense, they simply refused to fire on the protesters. You have to remember, many of these soldiers were from peasant and worker families themselves. They were tired of the war, and they saw their own brothers and sisters in the crowds. So they lowered their weapons. This was the absolute turning point. On February 27th, it went beyond just refusing to fire. Entire regiments of the army actively mutinied. They turned on their officers and joined the striking workers. With the army now on the side of the people, the Tsar had lost all control. His power in the capital had completely collapsed. It was over. With the Tsar's government in Petrograd having lost all authority, a new political landscape began to form, almost overnight. The old way of doing things was gone, and something new was being born out of the chaos. And out of this chaos, a new and very important word comes into focus: the Soviet. So what is a Soviet? Well, think of it simply as a council. It was a place where ordinary workers and soldiers could gather to represent the will of the people and organize themselves. This was power coming directly from the people, from the ground up. The most important of all these councils was the Petrograd Soviet. Striking workers and the soldiers who had mutinied, they all met together to form this powerful new body. And in a very symbolic move, they met in the exact same building where the Duma, the official parliament, used to meet. This sent a very clear message about where the real power now was. So what happened to the Tsar himself? With his government gone and his army against him, his end came very fast. A group of political leaders went to see him. Even his own military commanders told him the situation was hopeless. They all advised him to abdicate, to give up the throne. And on March 2nd, he did. And just like that, 300 years of Romanov family rule was over. But, just because the monarchy had ended, it didn't bring immediate peace or stability. In fact, it created a very confusing and unstable situation. Russia was now facing a very uncertain future. What came next is what historians call a system of dual power. It's like having two governments at the same time. On one hand, you had the provisional government. This was formed by leaders from the old Duma, and it was the official government. But on the other hand, you had the Petrograd Soviet. And the Soviet had immense influence because it had the real support of the workers and the soldiers. These two bodies were rivals, and this set the stage for even more conflict down the road. Now let's clear up a very common misunderstanding. Many people believe that Vladimir Lenin and his Bolshevik party led the February Revolution. This is simply not correct. At this stage, no single political party was organizing the movement. It was a spontaneous uprising. In fact, Lenin wasn't even in Russia at the time. He was in exile and would only return in April. The real leaders of this revolution were the ordinary workers of Petrograd, and especially the women who so bravely sparked those first strikes. So, to summarize, the February Revolution was a massive turning point in Russian and, in fact, world history. It successfully brought down the Tsar and ended centuries of monarchy. But the story was far from over. The deeper problems that had caused the revolution in the first place, Russia's involvement in the World War, the demand for land, the poverty in the cities, none of these had been solved. And this leaves us with a critical question. With the Tsar gone and two rival governments in his place, Russia was more divided than ever before. The old Russia was finished, but the new Russia was yet to be born. The question now was, who would truly rule the nation?